Great, great, great.
So, CJ, tell me a little bit about what you're working on now. Sounds like you have some great things on the horizon.
Yeah, my first film is about the Confederacy and why we have Confederate monuments. It's called, sorry, I need to take it again. My contact is coming out. Okay, great. My first film was called The Neutral Ground, and it was about Confederate monuments and why we have them and why people still say things like the Civil War wasn't about slavery. And that took 5 years to make. And I thought that we would be taking a break and figuring out, you know, what the next film would be. But the next film has kind of been a natural sequel in the fact that our film right now is illegal to show in the public schools of 14 states because of panic over critical race theory. So the next film is about what that panic is, what's at the root of that panic, why people are asking for kids to learn less. And so that's one of the things that we're working on next. So we have some TV stuff in the works, but the my mind is mainly on how do we tour the film currently to get it into the schools that will have us and aren't afraid of critical race theory bans, and then how do we also begin making a film about the force that's making that very difficult.
And what would you say was the biggest challenge about making this film?
About making the neutral ground,
Yes.
I would say the biggest challenge was figuring out where to end. Um, I think whenever you're making a piece about white supremacy is always like, aha, we have another episode for you. And you're like, no, I'm done telling this story. And, with the neutral ground, we were just trying to figure out how far will people go to hang on to four objects, right? Four monuments in New Orleans. It's a local property issue. Um, and we thought that project would be done in a couple months. It ended up taking 2 years just to come down, just for those monuments to come down. And the summer that those monuments came down was also Charlottesville. So in my film, I end up in Charlottesville because, I'm trying to film sort of a post-credit sequence for the film. And then that made it impossible for us to end the film, right? Like you can't have a story about taking down four monuments that is supposed to feel triumphant at the end and then just end with Charlottesville, because it pushed us into a whole new world where you're like, oh my God, like maybe white supremacy is winning. Are the Nazis coming back? That took us off track and made us have to rethink what story we're telling. And then when we were finished telling that story, then that was the summer of 2020 when George Floyd was lynched. So that made us change the ending again. So I think that those pieces of when you stop telling the story about white supremacy, that was definitely the hardest part, figuring out how you end when white supremacy continues to grow in America.
Absolutely. And are you going to make any sequels to this? Because it sounds like you have so much information that I feel like it could be several different movies.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still, this is my first film ever, right? This is uh you know I am excited about when we think about filmmakers like, Michael Moore or Stanley Nelson, or Penny Lane, right? Like those filmmakers are working something out over a course of films. Michael Moore is chasing lots of people around with microphones and trying to get into boardrooms and, exposing people. I think it's going to be the same for me. I think that for at least the next few foreseeable years, I'm going to continue making work about the stories that people tell, to keep them, the things that people say and the things that people do when they're faced with the choice of whether they can be honest about the past, right? So the first film was about the weird things people say about monuments when it's time to talk about who those men really were and what the Confederacy was. And the second film is going to be about the weird things people say and do when, you tell them that this nation was founded in slavery.
Absolutely. Yeah. I
Or
think
when
it's
you want to or when you want to teach kids that gay people exist, right? that
right.
you that you look
Exactly.
at the laws across the country. North Dakota's new critical race theory ban makes it literally illegal to teach students in public school that racism is anything besides our individual biases, right? Like teachers can be fired for teaching kids that structural racism exists. And that's the same across these 14 states, right? It's been proposed in over 24 states. And even in Florida, you see the panic over race in the classroom growing to be about gender, where all of a sudden they're trying to make it so you can get fired for talking to kids about different genders and sexualities, right? Half of the books on the book ban list in Texas are not about race, they're about sex and gender. So all of these ways that Americans, and often white Americans, have some weird allergy to the truth about the past, that's where I think I'm going to be making my work for, at least the next decade.
Yeah, I think you're incredible for doing all this. I mean, this is
Thanks.
exactly what we need right now. And what would you like to tell those 14 states, keeping it G-rated or PG rated, about how they should be handling these issues?
I think we have to walk our values, right? That if we say that this is a country that is about free speech, if we have an entire party that has spent the last century saying that they're against government intervention, that they're, against academic censorship, how is it possible that the fastest passing laws right now are actually punishing teachers for
That's
teaching truth in classrooms, right? That it's easy to win an election off of scaring parents that their kids are being indoctrinated, right? Like we've seen in Virginia, it's easy to win an election like that. But once parents actually get a look at these laws, they're going to see that what has been banned is not critical race theory. What has been banned is history, right? That the text of these laws say you can be fired for teaching a kid anything that makes them feel guilt, discomfort, or shame.
yeah,
Find me
exactly.
find me a
It's
chapter of American history that we pride ourselves on that doesn't make someone feel guilt, discomfort, or shame. World War II. You bet I feel guilt, discomfort, and shame about how long it took us to intervene in that war and what was even happening in those concentration camps, right? The same impulse that makes us want to celebrate us as liberators of those concentration camps. Like there's a whole lot of guilt, discomfort, and shame in World War II, right? In we interned the Japanese. How can you teach about how can you teach about women's suffrage, right? How can you teach anything about civil rights and the people that we celebrate as American heroes? How can you teach any of those without guilt, discomfort, and shame? These laws make that illegal. So that is what I would say to those states. And then that is also the type of film I'm trying to make. And what was so beautiful about being in the company of so many Black filmmakers at Pitch Black was that it's a moment where I got to zoom out and be like, let's look at the legacy of people who have been doing this work for decades before I was even born, right? That like when I think about why I'm a filmmaker and the first pieces of film that really moved me, I'm thinking about Marlon Riggs's Ethnic Notions that was shown to me
yes.
when I was in college at Brown. And then I'm also thinking of Eyes on the Prize. And Eyes on the Prize is the first documentary that actually made me feel something, right? Eyes on the Prize is the first documentary that showed me that where I could see myself in documentary, right? Like when you think about the educational documentaries that you grew up with, chances are you're watching a slow zoom on an old piece of archival and you're not looking at people who look like you and make you feel powerful. And Eyes on the Prize was the first film that made me feel like that. So then last night when we're giving out the Trailblazer Award to Orlando Bagwell, and Orlando Bagwell was the producer on Eyes on the Prize, there's a piece of continuity and history that made me feel overwhelmed and at times made me want to cry and made me feel really beaming with pride. That it's one thing to sort of herald and celebrate some of our best Black filmmakers, and it's another thing when they're all in the same room celebrating each other and sort of bestowing love and luck and financial support on the next generation of Black storytellers. It was a real gift to be there.
Well, that is beautiful. I can't begin to tell you, CJ, how proud I am of you. You are amazing. And I
Thank
hope
you.
we see more of you soon. I can't wait to have you
Thanks
back
so
on the
much.
show.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Okay, bye bye.
Thanks. Bye. Yeah.